How many of y'all have kids? I'm just curious. Here's what I need you to do. When I tell you this story, think about your kids. Think about your child coming home from a night out with their friends, laying down, going to sleep, feeling somebody come in the room and wake them, and drag her out of bed, naked, forced on her knees, with her hands over her head, begging for her life, begging for her hero, her father, me, that couldn't be there. She was 5'3". She weighed 115 pounds. Bang! Dead. Gone. Why? Because Alexander Devontae Dickey, who was arrested 39 goddamn times, 25 felonies, was on the street. How about that? How good are we doing for our family? How good are you doing for your kids?
So the clip that I just opened this video with is from a man called Steve Federico, who is testifying in South Carolina in a hearing sparked by the murder of a girl called Irina on the train. You guys have seen that clip time and time again, and we've covered it on this channel. And he was talking about an incident that, of course, impacted his own family, which was the murder of his daughter, Logan Federico. Now, she is pictured right here. As you can see, she's an absolutely beautiful girl. And as Steve ends up laying out before this South Carolina committee, one of the things that we found out is the fact that the perpetrator of this particular crime, a guy called Alexander Dickey, had 39 previous arrests. Multiple of those arrests were for serious felony burglary. However, the system bent over backwards in order to pretend that Alexander Dickey was actually the victim of society, that Alexander Dickey was actually an innocent Baba Angel Aladdin who is impacted by poverty, who is only breaking in and burglarizing people in order to feed his starving family. So, through a series of errors, and not so much errors, in the South Carolina judicial system, he was released onto the streets over and over again, repeatedly, despite the fact that the potential sentences that he could have accrued for his multiple serious violent crimes would have been about 150 years in prison, as laid out by Steve Federico.
He should have been in jail for over 140 years for all the crimes he committed. You know how much time he spent in prison? A little over 600 days in 10 years. He's only 30 years old. He was committing 2.65 crimes a year since he was 15 years old. But nobody could figure out that he couldn't be rehabilitated. Well, you'd have to put him in prison to see if he could be rehabilitated. Isn't that the idea of prison? But no, my daughter wanted to be a teacher. She finally figured it out 2 weeks before she was executed. And I haven't heard a damn word from Byron Gibson in South Carolina. Not one word. 4 months, no communication. His biggest concern was that he was pissed off about my interview and how I made him look on the Fox News channel with Trey Gowdy. How pathetic is that?
So the person he just mentioned there is Byron Gibson. Now, he is the solicitor for the Fifth Circuit in South Carolina that actually covers the counties in which these crimes, or many of these crimes, actually took place. And when the father is saying that he hasn't heard one word from him other than condemnation of his tone about his murdered daughter, that happens to be 100% true. And the reason for this is that Byron Gibson, like many woke Soros-backed district attorneys, is a career defense attorney, actually served 21 years as a defender of criminals, who is elected to a prosecution position, and of course runs the district attorney's office in a way that caters to the criminals. And make no mistake about it, Alexander Dickey received break after break after break by Gibson's district attorney's office, including consistently being prosecuted as a first-time offender, despite the fact that he was arrested 39 times. And you really need to understand on how sinister, how evil this is, how ridiculous this is, because we could look up Alexander Dickey's record on the internet via Google search, find out that he's a serial, ongoing threat to society, repeat offender, everything you would need to know in order to lock him up. Yet the Gibson District Attorney's Office, or Solicitor's Office, as it's called in South Carolina, decided that they had no access to that information and routinely prosecuted him. And when I say prosecuted, I mean in the least actual meaning of the word way humanly possible, this suspect as a first-time offender time and time again.
Less than 2 years before 22-year-old Logan Federico was murdered, the man accused of killing her pleaded guilty to committing a burglary for the first time. But it wasn't his first time. It was the third time he pleaded guilty to burglary. But prosecutors in Lexington County say they didn't know that. A repeat offender will typically get a higher sentence than a first-time offender. So if solicitors knew that this was not his first time, they tell me Dickey could have gotten a longer sentence, so long that he could have still been in prison today.
So what I just played for you guys is a local news segment post the outrage from the father that triggered the media to actually end up engaging with this case, that discovered that a couple of years ago, the suspect in this particular case actually pled guilty to a burglary. Again, a very serious, exactly the same crime that he was committing at the time that he killed Logan Federico. And during that plea guilty, it was assumed or presumed by the prosecution and by the judge that this was a first-time offense. Now, of course, there's a major problem with that, and that problem was this was not a first-time offense. Now, I've seen a bunch of different various collages of the mugshots of this particular criminal with, of course, Logan Federico in the center, and this does not tell the full story. Yes, this guy was arrested over and over again. He had multiple different convictions for multiple crimes, but the fact is, the soft-on-crime attitude from these woke prosecutors in and around this area decided to treat this guy as an innocent Baba Angel Aladdin, as somebody with no previous criminal record. So not only should he have been serving more time, so much so that he would not be able to commit this particular murder, but in addition to that, he also had probation violations that he was flagrantly flouting, and guess what? He didn't end up getting his probation revoked because they didn't know at the time of trial, it wasn't submitted before the judge, that this guy had a repeat criminal history. And the crazy thing about this is that this happening one time sounds like an error. It sounds like a mistake. Sounds like, oh, well, you know, what are you gonna do? Sometimes the prosecution ends up messing up on a particular case, but guess what? This didn't happen one time. This wasn't one instance where he pled to a burglary that should have been a second or third offense. Therefore, he should have actually served serious prison time. This happened multiple times.
This wasn't the first time Dickey broke into a home. In 2014, when Dickey was 19 years old, he pleaded guilty to burglary. 4 months later, in 2015, he pleads guilty to another burglary. This one is charged as a first offense, even though he pleaded guilty to that earlier charge in the same courthouse just months before. Then, in 2023, Dickey is back in court, pleading guilty to yet another burglary. This one also charged as a first offense, but it was his third offense. Less than 2 years later, Dickey is charged with another burglary in Columbia, and this time, the murder of Logan Federico.
Now look, those particular burglaries are not the extent of Dickey's criminal history.
So how did this happen? How does someone get convicted of first-time burglary twice? I found Dickey's burglary history in just minutes online. So why didn't prosecutors see it when they handled this case 2 years ago? The answer, they say, is in his rap sheet. It's the official record used to track someone's criminal history, and it's what solicitors use when prosecuting defendants. In 2023, Dickey's rap sheet was 15 pages long, but not a single burglary charge was on there. And the solicitor says it could come down to just a fingerprint.
But as you could see, 2 separate times this individual was allowed to plead guilty to burglary as a first offense, get a slap on the wrist, and be sent out on the streets only to reoffend again. And if you're Alexander Dickey and you're able to commit these crimes over and over and over again, and you keep getting slaps on the wrist, what is the incentive structure for you? You're a low IQ, absolute idiot who has no forethought in the crimes that you're committing. You obviously don't care about who you harm in the process, but of course, this particular area of South Carolina, the same courthouse, by the way, where he had become so commonplace he should be recognizable by the staff, says, oh my god, what an innocent Baba Angel Aladdin, didn't do nothing wrong, let him plead guilty again, because maybe, just maybe, if we give him a slap on the wrist, he'll do better, he'll be better. And by the way, there's also, if you look at the lengthy criminal history, a bunch of requests for diversion programs for this guy, a bunch of second, third, 25th chances that this guy ended up getting, and all of those chances ended up culminating in the murder of Logan Federico, who again was dragged out of her bed during the course of this robbery, forced to her knees, and shot execution style by this monster. And of course, when I say execution style, I need to make this 100% clear, I mean shot in the head while she was on her knees. She wasn't even facing away from Alexander Dickey at the time that she was murdered. He had no problem in a cold-blooded way with malice and aforethought looking her in the face and shooting her in the head because he wanted to steal the contents of her purse, because he wanted to go on a little bit of a spending spree with her credit cards. And by the way, according to the father, that's how they ended up catching him.
Logan deserves to be heard. Everyone on this panel deserves to be heard. And we will. Trust me. My daughter laid on the floor for 7 hours before somebody in that house recognized that something was wrong. And that career criminal, an hour later, went on a spending spree with her debit card. When they saw his face on a video, they didn't have to do a check. He was arrested so many times, they knew who he was. They knew exactly where to go get him. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic that I'm here today. Thank you for your time.
I want you guys to remember that Byron Gibson, again, the woke prosecutor in and around this area, said the real problem in this case is that this man is too angry. This man is too upset. This man wasn't polite enough to Byron Gibson. Again, this thug, this absolute criminal who got slapped on the wrist time and time again, who got released over and over again, was so recognizable to law enforcement that when he went on a post-burglary and murder spending spree, they ended up being able to identify him just by the look of him on the surveillance video. The local police were so familiar with this thug, with this criminal, with this repeat offender that they were like, oh yeah, that's Alexander. That's the guy that we keep arresting time and time again. By the way, he stole a car to start off this crime spree. So he didn't even start off with the homicide, but they knew right away from the surveillance video who this guy was. They knew right away that this guy was a dumb, stupid, ridiculously vicious criminal, and they were able to pick him up instantly. Instantly, they were able to find him because it was that easy. Because again, he was not concealing his crimes to anyone except, of course, for the prosecutors in South Carolina who thought he was a first-time offender, even though, again, he had basically Criminal of the Month plaques all over the wall. But yeah, this is what went down in South Carolina, and I think it's important to hear a little bit more from the father about how you will not forget him, you will become sick of his face because he's never going to let these legislators live this down, because I think that message is incredibly powerful.
That we're letting our 22-year-old kid visiting friends, it's all she ever wanted to do was visit friends. And she literally was executed while on her knees begging for her life. Her name's Logan Federico, not Irina. And you will not forget her. I promise you. You will be sick and tired of my face and my voice until this gets fixed. I will fight until my last breath for my daughter. You need to fight for the rest of our children, the rest of the innocents, and stop protecting the people that keep taking them from us. Please. You have the power. We put you in the power to do what you have to do. We're asking you, we're begging you all to stop this. 39 crimes in 10 years, 25 felonies. Can anybody here explain to me, well, how possibly he could be on the street? Possibly be on the street. How is it possible? I could sit down in a room and I could explain the whole process of how it failed, how South Carolina failed, Logan. Okay? How lack of communication. What y'all did, you woke up a beast and you pissed off the wrong daddy. Because I'm going to put it out there. And I'm not going to be quiet until somebody helps.
Look, everything he said right there makes 100% sense. It's basic, it's logical, it's sensible. So, of course, post the Black Lives Matter riots, with the election of a soft-on-crime prosecutor, we should not be surprised that the exact opposite was being done. But you know what? We're not going to forget Logan Federico on this channel either. We are going to follow this case. We are going to follow Byron Gibson until he is thrown out on his ass out of the solicitor's office, because he does not deserve to be there. He broke the public trust. He told us time and time again that the real issue in our criminal justice system is evil white racism that's unfair to people like Alexander Dixon. But in reality, what we can see for ourselves is that the real unfairness is that people like Alexander Dixon get to be released time and time again, get multiple different chances, and they get to murder people like Logan Federico. But you know what? That's all I really have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about a father who called out a terrible system. Till next time.